Hello everyone and welcome to a new video in our IFS Cloud video series. My name is Marcela Ușan, I'm an IFS consultant, and today I want to do a deep dive session into developing two BPA workflows, so two business process automation workflows. I hope you managed to see the previous video tutorial where I went over the basics of understanding how business process automation workflow works in IFS Cloud. And now we will take it one step further and start building some of at least two of these workflows. Yeah? But maybe before going into the development of the workflows, let me just paint the picture of what we are trying to achieve. So what I will show you today was really a valid business requirement of one of my customers. Yeah, that they needed a solution for this requirement. Yeah, so let me just explain. If I will go to customer, just to set the stage. Yeah, so I have created one custom field in the customer, in the sales data. It's basically just a radio button. And let me wait for the page to load. So we have this Decathlon customer that we've been playing with for a long time. If I go to the sales, and inside the sales again I go to the sales tab. Here I created a custom field that says restricted, and it's checked or not checked. Yeah, so basically the process would be that whenever there is a customer order for a restricted customer, then this restricted status should be shown on the customer order header, and also the release of the order should be blocked unless the order is specifically acknowledged by the user. Yeah, so in this scenario, we are talking about a customer so there is an integration with a trade compliance tool, yeah, outside of IFS Cloud, and there's a job every night that runs and sends all the different customers from the IFS Cloud system, and those are checked against some blacklists available on these trade compliance tools. And if some of the contacts in some customers are found to be doing some shady business, then it would come back in the and update the restricted field. Yeah? And once this is restricted, we want the user, the order coordinators, to pay closer attention before releasing this. Yeah, to bring to their knowledge that, hey, we might have issues with its customer, maybe do some more analysis on it, or release the order at your own, but you take responsibility for releasing it. Yeah. Of course, IFS Clouds provide some functionality for that. Yeah, we could set up an expire date. That's why I set this field next to the expire date, but expire date would really block you from creating any customer order for a customer that is expired. Therefore, what the customer needed was a way to create customer orders, but make the users aware that that customer is on a blacklist from a trade compliance perspective, and they need to acknowledge that before releasing the order. Yeah. So we have this custom field here, and then if we open the customer order page, I created some custom fields inside the customer order. So if you want more details about how to create custom fields, how to publish them with Page Designer, you might find more information in a previous video where I went over creating custom fields in IFS Cloud. And this is not the purpose of this video. Basically, what I want to show you is, let's see if we can find only planned orders. Yeah, and here we can immediately see I have added a customer status restricted. Yeah, and there is a restriction acknowledged and acknowledged by and acknowledged date. Let me show it like that so that we have more real estate on the screen. Yeah, right now the customer is restricted, but if I just duplicate and go to uncheck that customer, uncheck the restricted checkbox on the customer, you will see that the customer on the customer order it will no longer show as restricted. Yeah? Just bear with me for a second just to lay the foundation for what we are trying to do then. So I go to the sales and I would quickly in sales I would just uncheck this. So this one we say it's no longer restricted. Of course this will be done by the integration with trade compliance, yeah, but for this demo I will do it manually, and if we refresh this one we will see it's not restricted, and also the other fields went away. Yeah? So I have set them up from page designer so that they would only show when this customer status is restricted. No? Let's put it again to restricted, refresh the page, and we see now it's restricted, and then we have restriction acknowledged, yes or no, acknowledged by, and acknowledged on which date. Of course, if we want to edit this, yeah, we will need to enable the editing button and then set it here. Yeah? So basically what we are trying to achieve, the behavior is the following. The user creates a new customer order. They see that the customer status is restricted. When they try to release the order, they would get a warning message, a toast message. And so we will create a validation workflow to check if the customer status is restricted and the restriction acknowledge is not set to yes. Then we will show an error message that the customer is restricted. They need to acknowledge before releasing. And this is the first workflow that we want. And then the second workflow would be a process enrichment workflow. Yeah? At the moment somebody edits this one and makes it to yes and saves, then we want to monitor the change on this field to also update acknowledged by and acknowledged on, yeah, to put a timestamp. You see, these fields are not editable. This will be only updated by the workflow. Yeah, we don't want anyone to be able to change the information here. Yeah, we want the workflow to capture whoever pressed the save button when they change this to acknowledged. Yeah. Okay, so I will cancel edit. So this is what we're trying to achieve. Two workflows, one validation workflow, so we cannot release if the customer status is restricted but the order was not acknowledged, and another one that whenever the restriction acknowledge is set to yes, then we capture the user and the timestamp. No? And at the end we will show this on a lobby element in the customer order processing lobby page. Yeah? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Yeah? The first thing that we would need to do, we would create the workflow that would block the release of the customer order. Yeah? How would we do that? We go to workflows, yeah, and from here we will create a new one. I will give it a name, C_block customer order, block release, customer order, restricted. Okay, so now I have a new workflow created. We see we have a version 1, it's not deployed, we don't have anything in a projection action, not event action. In this case we will use a projection action. In the second case where we want to update the user and the timestamp, we will use a custom event action, yeah, because we want to monitor only when that custom field changes the value, and we cannot do that with a projection action. So I will go to version 1 and just say design, and you see now we have a white canvas, yeah, and we need to put in some information, yeah, to design our workflow. So the first thing I will create a task, yeah, link the starting event with the task, and the task I will need to say what type of task it is. Yeah, so I have this small range, I can change the type, and most of the times I use an IFS API, yeah, or an IFS REST call, but mostly IFS API. This has access to all the projections and projection actions from IFS Cloud. And sometimes I will also use a script task. Yeah? When I want to write a small JavaScript, this is already programming, but you can use AI to help with the JavaScript syntax. Just tell it what you want it to do, and it can write quite nicely the JavaScript for you. And then you just copy paste it in the task. But I will say this is an IFS API. Yeah, I can also give it a name here. I will say read customer order. Okay. So basically we want to read the customer order. No, here I need to say read customer order. Yeah. And now in the API details, I would say, yes, I want to read, and then the API name, of course, if I come here, I could open debugging, or I could just open the page info. Also in the page info, you can see what's the projection. Yeah, so I take customer order handling. API name is customer order handling. And entity set name is customer order set. Yeah, we also see that one here in the debug. Customer order set, this is the entity set. And then what do we want? We want to add a new parameter. So we want to read an order, but which is the order that we want to read? We want to read the order number. Also here, if we go, we can see exactly what's the column name, and the attribute name would be order NO. We can even copy it from here. So we want to say read me all the customer orders where the order number is equal to, and then we need to give it, it's already used somewhere else. Yeah, I need to give it like that. This means it's a workflow parameter. Yeah, if I put a dollar sign and the curl brackets. Yeah, this is what I want to do at this activity. Yeah, so basically I will set up a projection action for this. Yeah, so this workflow will be triggered whenever there will be a release action on the customer order, and from there, yeah, it will invoke with the proper order number which we wanted to release. Yeah, so the order number, this the value, will be coming from the projection action that will be triggered. This is something that the workflow knows how to do immediately. Okay, then we need to put a gateway, yeah, decision point. Let's connect our task with the decision point, and then we will put an end process and then another end process. And we need to connect this decision point with both of the ends. And so, how do we think about this? So here on the top, we will have, let's say the customer is not restricted, so releasing should not be blocked. Yeah, so we could set this as a default flow. Yeah? We set this to default, so we don't write any condition here, because the condition we will write it below. So if the condition is not true, it will go to the default. Yeah. And here we can also put a description. And we would say a name. Customer is not restricted. Don't block release customer order. Don't block the release. Okay. Let me just move this a bit up so we know what this is doing. Yeah, it's good to document always what we are doing. Then here we would need to put a condition, and here the condition would be condition type. Let's put JavaScript script, and it would be JavaScript, and the script would be our custom field, which we see if we can find it here. Our custom field, this one, CF customer status. And then we need to put equal in JavaScript. Equal, if you want to compare the value, it's two equal signs. Then double quotations, restricted. And we want to say that the restriction acknowledge is set to false. And we need to copy this second field, restriction acknowledged. Is equal false. Here we don't need any quotation marks because this is a Boolean field. Yeah, it's a true false. So we say if this is false and the customer is restricted, we will need to show an error message. No? And here in the name, we could say customer is restricted, block release CO. Okay. So this is what we are doing here. And then, so we have the check that we're doing here if the status is restricted and the acknowledgement of the restriction is false. Then we show an error message. So we need to change this process end from a normal process end to an IFS failure event. Yeah, we can have multiple events here, but I don't know much about the rest. But IFS failure event is what we will use, and we can define the error message in different languages. Of course, I will put it in English, and I will say something like workflow C block release CO restricted, and then say it like that. The customer on this CO appears to be restricted. This CO cannot be released unless the restriction is acknowledged. The restriction is acknowledged. Okay. And we can leave it with no name here, and this is what we will have. Yeah. And now we could save it as version 1, close, and if you remember from last time, we could also do an test. Yeah, we could also debug to see if it works. So we have an order number here. Let me just copy it. And if we go to the workflow designer before deploying it, yeah, we can inspect it, and obviously we know it's expecting the order number. This is what it's checking. We can give the value of the order that we have. We know it's with a restricted customer and the restriction is not acknowledged. And we can inspect and see which way it goes. Yeah, and we can see it's coming here. Here we can see it's reading all the different attributes from the order. Yeah, we can see all the different fields, yeah, which is really nice. And then based on the fields that we are getting, from here we should also get the CF customer status, yeah, which obviously is restricted, and we will also get the restriction acknowledge, which is false. And this is exactly what we are checking here. Yeah? If the status is restricted and the restriction acknowledge is false, then we go this route. Yeah? And indeed, we can see here that we got the error message with red. Customer on DCO appears to be restricted. DCO cannot be released unless the restriction is acknowledged. Well, easy. This is what we wanted to do. We just deploy it. C underscore block release CO restricted, for the lack of a better name. And I will say deploy and close. Okay, so now if I go back to my workflow, if I refresh, I will see that this one is deployed. Yeah, now we see it in green, it's active. And we will just need to add a projection action. Yeah? Projection action, we could try to see what action is invoked when we change the status to released. Yeah? In order to do that, what I would do, I would use the Arena Insights. Yeah? We can use the Arena Insights extension, and if I open the debug info, I would be able to see the command button, page level button details. But not really, it's not what I need. I will close this. Let me just open the debugger in Chrome, Control Shift I. We'll open the debugger, and here we have the IFS Cloud. That would show up in a moment. Come on, IFS Cloud tab. Yes, now we have it, IFS Cloud tab, and we go to network. Yeah, remember you will see this IFS Cloud tab if you have these DevTool links from the downloaded from the add-ons, from the login screen. Then what we want to do here is in the customer order, yeah, let's say we want to release this one just to see what's the post request that will be generated. Okay. Where's the post request? Yeah, then I need to open it from here. I think the debugger, let me just close this one. I think I opened it from the wrong page. I need to open it from here. Okay, IFS Cloud, and let me just release another one. I will just say release, and then I will go to the debugger, network. Okay, and now I get the post. Yeah, and here I can see the payload. Come on. Okay, so I have multiple posts here, order lines. Oh. Where is the one that's doing the release? We maybe just clear this out and try again. Let's find a good order. This one is not restricted, yeah, but we don't really care about this. What we care is that we clean up again the debug, and then we will just say status release. Okay, and let's see in the default one from here. We go to IFS Cloud, Network. This one it is, I think. Customer order handling. Customer order, get values for release. No, not really. Not this one. Yeah, this is the one that we're looking for, this post. Here we can see customer order set, and then it's having a projection action, customer order, release order. Yeah, this is what we, let me see if I can see it here. Where is it in general? Yes, so this is what we are looking for, customer order handling. And then we have the action, the call, customer order handling, customer order, release order. Yeah, this is what we want to see. Then I go to the workflow, I click on plus for the projection action, and I have customer order handling. Okay, and I know it's not data, but it's a call that I need to select. So not data, but call. And the call name is, it was customer order underscore release order, this one. And it's taking customer number and company. Okay, and this one, if we have a look, this one, if we can have a look at it, it will be this will be a validation, yes, because we show an error message, and it will be a validation of type before. Okay, and then we do next, and we enable the projection action and finish. No? So now what did we do? We created our workflow, yeah, with all the logic inside, and we identified which is the action that the user is doing in the system that should trigger the workflow. Yeah? So the action is simply going to status and saying release. Yeah? Then let's just test this. Real life, we just go and create a new customer order for the Decathlon customer. Let me just close the debugger because it's making the system slower overall. Then Decathlon customer. I will save it. Okay. And I have the restriction acknowledged, which is no at the moment. And the customer is restricted. Yeah. Therefore, if I try to change the status to release, I should get the information from the workflow. Yes, indeed, that the customer on this customer order appears to be restricted. The customer order cannot be released unless the restriction is acknowledged. Yeah, easy. This is what we wanted to get. Then, if we change the status here to yes, to true, the restriction is acknowledged. I know the customer is restricted and I acknowledge that restriction. And then I will go ahead and try to release it again. And this time it should release it successfully. Yes, indeed, our order is now released. Yeah, that's what we wanted to get. But now comes the next point. in our development. So we need another workflow that whenever this restriction acknowledge is set to yes, we would need to update the acknowledge by and acknowledge on. No? And this is the other workflow that we will be working on. Yeah, and let me go and open the workflow. If we go back, yeah, just create a new one. CO add acknowledge user date. No? Add acknowledge user and date inside the CO. Okay. And here we will go to design again the process. So basically, again, what we will need to do, if I go to design, yeah, again, we start from a blank canvas. We will add the first task, connect the starting point to the task. Again, the task would be a read IFS API, a read projection. And we will say read again customer order. And the API name would be again customer order handling. Yeah. And the entity set name would be customer order set. So it's quite nice that you get all the different possibilities. So you can just select. Obviously the parameter is again the order number. Now, once again, if you don't know how to get all of this information, you go to debug from the page that you're looking for, page info, and you get the customer order handling, the customer order set, you get the order number field, you get everything. So key order number is equal to the parameter order number, and this parameter this time will be coming from a custom event. Yeah, that's very important. Okay, that's all we want to do now. Let's maybe add a separate task after having read the customer order. This time we want to set some variables within a script. So then we go to the small wrench and we will say this is a script task. Yeah, and we will name it set variables maybe, for the lack of a better name, and script format is JavaScript, and the script, I have it, let me just paste it and then I will explain it what it's doing. I wrote it before so that we don't waste a lot of time during the training. Yeah. So basically we are defining one variable called restriction acknowledge restriction eck, where we get the variable from the workflow. Yeah, we read the customer order and we get this CFC restriction eck. No? And then we set this as a workflow variable because we will be using it later on. Yeah, we set the variable restriction eck that we will use later on. Then we handle the date. Yeah, so we define a new date time variable, which is a new date. Yeah, and we get the current ISO date, and then we split the date and the time. Yeah, this is some fancy functions in time functions in JavaScript. Yeah, I don't know all of that, but it's something that I got from AI. Yeah, so it's quite nice to use this. And then at the end, I just set a variable in the workflow called sysdate, yeah, which is this IFS date time. No? Yeah, this is very much technical, but yeah, you can just copy paste this from here. Okay, and after we have set this variable, we would need to use a gateway, yeah, decision point. So decision point and two endpoints, two end processes. Yeah, again, we would connect the decision gate to both of the end processes. So one of them would be the default flow, and in another one we will put a condition. So the default flow would be that acknowledge restricted equals false, and then do nothing. Yeah. Because here we will be monitoring for acknowledge restricted. Yeah. So whenever it's set to true, then we want to capture that information and update our order with that information. Yeah. And then in here, here we will give it a name, ec restricted equals true, set user and date. Yeah, this is what we are checking in here, and let's identify the line so that we can do the check. And the check is quite simple. So we have condition type again, script, JavaScript, and we have the previous parameter that we have set up, restriction ec, acknowledged. Yeah? If this one equals true, and to n%, and customer order status, this custom field, customer status, and just pay attention with the uppercase and lowercase because JavaScript is case sensitive, equals restricted. Yeah, so if the restriction is acknowledged, yes, it's true, and the customer status is restricted, then we want to do something. Yeah, and we need to put another task before we end this process. And this task we need to say it's an IFS API. Yeah, and we can give it a name, update user and date, or update acknowledge user and date. User and date. Yeah. And obviously this time will no longer be a read action, but will be an update action. Yeah. And we need to put in the API name is again customer order handling. Customer order handling. Entity set is customer order set. Yeah, and then we need to define some parameters. Yeah. So we will put the order number, which is getting the value from the event action that we will create. And then we need to add two more parameters. Yeah, and then this will be to update the fields. Yeah, so we will have these other parameters. If I go to customer order, page info, basically here I will be able to see restrict ec user. Let me copy this one. I will put it in here, and I will create a new parameter for restricted ec date, where I will put the timestamp that I calculated in the set variables. Okay, and now here for the date I already have my variable from here, if you remember. So I have my variable sysdate that I could use. So I go back to the task that's updating the customer order, and here I can write, as you know, the $sign and then curly brackets sysdate. Yeah, so I take the parameter that I calculated and initialized in these set variables. And for the restrict acknowledge user, there is already an embedded workflow parameter. Let me just paste it here, which is IFS BPA current user ID, yeah, which takes whoever is executing the projection action or the event action gets initialized under this parameter inside the workflow, and this is something that we could use. Yeah, so we don't need to identify separately who's the user running under that session. We can just get this default BPA current user ID, which we can use directly like that. Okay. And let's see, do we need something else? I think not. So let's recap. We read the customer order, we set some of the variables, and if the restriction acknowledge is true, so if that field is set to true and the customer status is equal to restricted, then we update the user and the date. No? If not, we don't do anything. Okay, that sounds like a plan. Let's go ahead and test this. So we have a customer order. Yes, we do. So we have this customer order, which is set, restriction acknowledge is set to yes, and the customer status is set to restricted. We could take this order number and do a bit of a debugging just to test and see. So we put here the order number and we paste the value and we hit inspect. Okay, perfect. And we see the small I, how it's going. So it's getting all of the attributes of the attributes from the order that we were able to identify, and then it's setting some variables. And here we should be able to see somewhere the sys. Let me just filter for sys date. Yeah, so we can see exactly today is 7th of October, 1357. And we should also have the current user. It's already a built-in parameter that we will not be able to see, but we can easily see that it's going this route. Yeah, so it evaluated positively that the restriction ACK is true and the customer status is restricted. Yeah, we can even check it here. Restriction ACK is true. Yeah, we could have very well be using this standard field, this custom attribute, and couldn't, it was not mandatory to create another parameter with the same one. Yeah, but we can see that the status is restricted, what we are looking for, and the restriction acknowledge is true. Yeah? So therefore the workflow goes in this direction, and obviously it will use the update of the customer order handling and put in the restricted acknowledge user and the date. Yeah? Good. Then we could save it, and we could deploy it. C_CO add acknowledged user date, deploy. Okay, so this workflow is deployed, and now if I just refresh, we still need to create a way to trigger this workflow. Yeah, so triggering this workflow with a projection action is not a viable option because we really only want to monitor for whenever this field changes. Yeah? And whenever this field changes to yes, then we want to do something. Yeah? It's not possible with a projection action to monitor for a specific field. Therefore, we would do a custom event. Yeah? So let me go to create a custom event. So I will create a new custom event. I will call it C_CO set acknowledge user date. Test workflow, doesn't really matter for the description. Next, obviously the entity we can find out from here. So we go to debug page, info entities customer order. Okay, and the table, very important, this point, the table, we don't want the customer order tab, but we want the customer order underscore CFT. Customer order underscore CFT. Yeah, remember that these fields that we created are custom fields. Yeah, so these custom fields, especially the persisted custom fields. Yeah, this one, the restriction acknowledge, is a persisted field that we give the value from the user perspective. This is stored in a custom fields table, and therefore we have CFT, custom fields table. Still the same page name, yeah, customer order, but custom fields table. Yeah. And when do we want to fire this event? When objects are changed, but only when a certain attribute is changed. Yeah? And we only refer to this CF restriction ec. And then we say next. Yeah, and here we need this field as the new value of this field, the restriction ec. And obviously we also need a row key. Okay, and this is the unique identifier of the order in the database. Yeah? Here we see a list of all the custom fields that exist on the customer order custom fields table, but we only care about the restriction ec. The date and the user is something that we will set with the workflow. So obviously this we don't care because they don't exist. Okay, we go next and finish. Okay, so we have our custom field, which will custom event, which will be triggered when objects are changed, but only when this field is changed. And then we can create a new event action. Event action type we can set to workflow. Yeah, we don't put any conditions here. We already put the conditions in the workflow, although we could set the condition here that the restriction ec is true, but we already put it in the workflow, so we will execute the workflow anyways. Next, workflow ID. Yeah, here, unfortunately, we don't have a list of values to choose from, so I will really need to copy this workflow ID. Type of workflow, obviously this would be a process enrichment. Yeah, so we want the system to do something automatically when something happens. Yeah? And the timing, we want it to be after. Yeah, so first the user will update the restriction acknowledge field to yes, we'll save it, and then this workflow will start. It's all part of the same transaction, but will be done after the customer order handling update activity is done. Okay, that's all that we need here. Then we will say next and enable event action and finish. Okay, so the event action is enabled. Now if we go back to our workflow and refresh the page, it should show here an event ID. Yeah, because we created the event action and linked it with this workflow. Therefore, we see here that the event is enabled, the action is enabled. It's based on modifying the record. Yeah. And there is an action number 0. Yeah, we can view the action from here directly, which is nice. Yeah, we can see what this is doing. Yeah, executing this workflow, process enrichment, and timing is after. Yeah. Let's go back. So the workflow is deployed, the trigger is set to the event action, and once again the event action is whenever this button will, this field will change. Yeah? So let's go ahead and try to create a new order. Yeah, we start it all from scratch for our Decathlon customer. Let's see if our CRIM, our configuration works. We will save it. Okay. Yeah, we can even add a line for a bike. Cube Reaction Pro for one piece. Okay, we save it. And we have our order created. It's a restricted, okay, minimum quantity. Yeah, we don't care about this standard message. It's a customer that's restricted, but the restriction is not acknowledged. So now if we try to release it, we should get the workflow telling us that we need to acknowledge the restriction. And this is the first workflow that we created. And you see here the message that we're getting, and the order stays in status planned. Therefore, the next thing we need to do is do some background check on this customer, and if we really think it's okay that we will get paid, we will just say we acknowledge the restriction, save it, and there you go. Now we have updated the acknowledge by and acknowledge on with the event action that was monitoring for this restriction acknowledge field, and it updated these two fields. Now you can see this here, nice and easy. Now if we want to unrestrict the customer, or just to create another order for a customer that's not restricted, just to see that it has no impact on a not restricted customer, whatever we did. So we will see customer status is not restricted, and we should be able to normally release. Okay, this is from the previous video that we did, where we created a user interaction workflow. This is still active, doesn't really matter. Okay, we just updated this customer PO number to test 123123, but now we just want to release it. And in this case, it's not a restricted customer. We don't see the restriction acknowledge and the user and the date fields. So we just release, and it should go through without any issues. It should be changed from planned to released. Yeah, and indeed we see it's released. So our CRIM, our configuration that we did, only impacts the customer orders for which the customer is restricted. Now, as a final thing that I did separately in a lobby. Basically, I included if I go to the lobbies page, customer order processing. Customer order processing. Here I have included a lobby element. You can see it here with all the restricted customer orders acknowledged. So that management could see what were the latest orders that were restricted and were acknowledged by which user and at which date. This is just for management overview, but if you want to learn more about lobby development, there is already a lobby introduction tutorial and lobby development separate tutorial. So feel free to watch those if you want to see how to leverage the lobbies to display different information from different parts of the system. But this was all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. We've learned how to create a validation workflow and a process enrichment workflow. Fairly basic ones, but I think you got a picture of what's possible and how complex or not that complex workflow development could be. Until next time, stay safe. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.